Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia. Welcome back to another episode of our Suzerain Let's Play. So we're back after getting kind of threatened by the justices. It's not looking too good because we have issues with the business world, we have issues with our justices, everyone's trying to strong arm us, and I personally don't like to get strong armed. So we gotta get a little bit stronger ourselves. We can't just be making economic decisions and, handing out stimulus checks that cannot help us sustain our power. It's good for the country, but we could be very well gone by that time. We have a high school issue where 12 students died after eating a free meal laced with pesticide. Poverty-stricken city. Time for women to stand up. Women's right. Now this is something that I can stand behind. My wife is very pro women's right, and personally, if you introduce another half of the population to the workforce, it's good for everything in society. Questioning soulless education. Yes, we do want to fix our educational system, but things like military has to come first. Our budget is down to 1. And we have some foreign policy issues between Agnolia and Vauxland about the dispute for island in the middle here. That's a pretty key shipping route. So we got to monitor that as well. Let's see, we have a report from Boring. Gather thousands of books to be spreading communists, and they burned it. Oh dear. From our party also joined the burning. The tension between the various factions still runs pretty high. Massive counter-protests against Young Swords, local politician Red Youth, property and injuries. We need to strengthen our police system, I believe. We also have Buddhist influence. Religious recruitment, that is a thing we have to deal with as well. There's still the poor region, now it's lack of hospitals. And back to our main business, which is a barbecue with our son. It was a Saturday afternoon, my first break from work in what felt like years, and the weather couldn't have been more perfect. Trying to keep my mind off the upheaval sparked by the Carcass assassination, I lit the backyard grill. Monica and Deanna went out shopping for craft materials, and I would give the staff the day off. I had given the staff the day off. It was just myself and Frank at home. I wasn't sure how he felt about me at the moment, but I did know how he felt about barbecued ribs. Our cook had left some marinating in the refrigerator. Sure enough, as soon as Frank glimpsed the grill and the meat, he stepped outside to join me. Come to spend some quality time with your old man, have you? Sure, if you can spare a few minutes out of your busy schedules. I'm sorry, I know I haven't been around very often lately, but I'm happy to see you now. It's okay, I know you got the most stressful job in the country and you have got to feed your family on top of it all. We both chuckled. I turned to tend to the fire. Here, let me try. He grabbed the fan, started quickly waving it over the coal. The fire roared to life. He turned to look at me with a grin on his face, as if he was expecting a praise. Good job. Thank you, sir. It is in our utmost interest to fulfill our duties with precision. The grilling shall commence in exactly 1 minute and 32 seconds. That was a spot-on impersonation of Lucien. We looked at each other for a second and burst out laughing. I realized my throat was parched. There was a 6-pack of beer in the kitchen. Huh. Do we share a drink with our son? We discourage smoking. I guess we can allow a few beers. You mean I can't, but Mom told me. He stopped himself, quickly ran inside, returned with 2 beers. We cracked them open, clinking the bottle and gazing out into the city skyline. The kid just wants to be a man. For a moment, my thought flashed back to my childhood and my relationship with my own father. My father was a rich man. We never had to worry about food, clothes, or anything else, yet he was nearly always away, and constantly distracted on the rare occasions when he was at home. Now that I was president, I was worried that I would end up just like my father, distant and absent from Frank's life. Dad, can I ask you something? We are family. You can ask anything. It's just, I feel like there's so much you've been hiding from me about your past and about what's going on right now. Like at dinner that night after the ball, you told me everything was under control, but it wasn't, was it? I know what happened in the 20s. We learned all about it in school. Now with protests and the riots, is it going to be the same thing? Dad, is there going to be a civil war in Sordland? No, I'll never let that happen. Good. But what was it like back then? Uncle Peter said two of you went through a lot. I'm not a kid anymore, you can tell me. Before I could gather my thoughts, the familiar images started flashing before my eyes. Images of soldiers advancing towards me and my friends, weapons drawn. Of people I knew, friends and neighbors being dragged through the streets and murdered in alleyways. The shock and grief on the faces of fathers, mothers, and orphaned children. Those were dark times. It seems like it. But you're nearly a grown man. Let's talk about it. Frank leaned forward in his chair, his eyes wide open. Tell Frank about the coup. I was barely older than you now, studying economics at Lockhaven Business School. I was a freshman, excited and young. I just left the classroom to go back home as I heard the sound of multiple vehicles approaching the campus gates. As they got closer, I realized they were military camouflage trucks and tanks carrying hundreds of soldiers. The same soldiers that were supposed to protect Sordland citizens pointed their guns at us. They immediately took control of the facilities. One of my friends asked what was going on, was arrested immediately. More people got angry and gathered in protests. Frank kept listening, a shocked look on his face. Tell him that you ran. Yes, let's go with the truth. Seeing the crowd gather, I knew something was going to happen, something bad. I decided it was impossible to go against our men and ran away from the scene. Ran away from my friends who were getting arrested and shot to save my own dear life like a coward. I still feel my flight was justified. Anyone would do the same. No one could sleep that night because of gunshots and sounds of boots. I can't forget the screams to this day. Frank leaned back in his chair, his shoulders slumped heavily. Tell Frank about the Civil War. It was right after I met your mother. We had both joined the same political debate group to push for some change after the coup of 27. But over the next year, the state of Sordland deteriorated. People started picking sides, and I tried to stay away as much as I could. Then one night it happened. Two different factions in the army, one of them led by fascist General Suzerain, and the other by socialist General Ricard, started fighting against each other. It was a bloodbath. Nowhere was safe. Frank shifted in his seat, visibly uncomfortable. People organized protests either for or against Ricard. I heard about the clashes the next day. Many of my friends were shot and arrested. I isolated myself for a month, and that's enough for today. It's okay, I'm sorry. I should have asked you about it. I know I don't understand how easy my life is sometimes. One more thing though. I know you managed to not take any sides. Do you mind if I ask why? They're two sides of the same coin. Frank raised his eyebrow, his curiosity still not satisfied, but sensing my reluctance to go on, he simply nodded. Sorry for bombarding you with questions. I know I complain sometimes, but my problems are nothing compared to what you went through. I'm here to listen to them, no matter what they are. Before Frank could say anything else, I heard the front door unlock. Deanna and Monica's voices and sound of rustling shopping bags filled the house. Alright, I'll be upstairs until dinner. Frank went in and dashed upstairs. I took a long sip from my beer, looking at the city and now setting sun. I hope that talking to Frank about my past had been the right decision. Part of me felt as if some sort of burden had been lifted, but I had the same nightmare again that night. Well, I wonder how that's going to impact the story going forward, but let's see the reports. Morna's industry output concerns. Ooh. Down 12% from last year. Additional support industry capacity. They believe it's going to turn around, but it's going to lose another 2% capacity. Investment would offset the trend, but that's a city level issue. We're more worried about national level issues. A prisoner riot. Political prisoners. A warden was killed. 4 guards, 21 prisoners died, 134 injured. Yeah, our country is not in a great state right now. Recession hits farmers again. 16% of all wheat are rotting in barns due to lack of buyers. We need some trade. We need to find some markets. Many members of the USP, led by Albin Calvin and the reformist wing of the party, clarified their demand from the government in the party congress. For the upcoming constitutional reform, Albin stated that without ministry reforms, they won't be able to stand behind the new reform package. Huh, interesting. Ministry reforms. Basically, the assembly want to say in my cabinet decisions, which I think is okay. Attack on a communist protest. Uh-oh, a machine gun from the armed forces killed 16 after shooting at 25. Buddhist separatist. Sword FC, Enrica FC, Derby postponed due to protests. Undemocratic elections of Sordland. Debating the threshold. The threshold needs to stay, I think, for us to retain power. We cannot let that go. We have a visit to Narbel, one of the poorer regions, if I remember correctly. Travel to the snow-covered city of Narbel in the Nargis region for the Rural Development Forum organized by the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education. The mountainous city of Narbel had gritty tones to it. It's mostly regarded as one of the poorer cities in Sordland. Its people were hardy and wary. Even after the discovery of natural resources in the area, years of neglect by the central government were apparent on the buildings and the general infrastructure. Natural resources, namely gas and oil, were now under the control of Gazprom, which elevated the corporation to a place of power. Curiously named very close to the Russian gas powerhouse, or the oil powerhouse, same firm. Okay. My task in this forum was mainly symbolic. Fake smiles and handshakes with oil barons, meeting with local politicians, but most importantly of all, to make sure that Narbel does not feel like it was forgotten by the government. The scenery so far, however, was a reflection of Narbel's neglect. Main roads to the city were not maintained well. There were many bumps and empty, discolored spots in asphalt. Navigating and swerving to avoid the inconveniences, our motorcade finally started nearing the city. As if my discomfort from the bumpy ride was apparent to him, Sergei rolled down the partition window. We'll be arriving at the Hotel West in a few minutes, sir. Thank you for letting me know. Anytime. It is my duty. After a moment, Sergei started to smile under his mustache. What's the smile for? Sir, I just want to say, it's been great these last 2 months. As you know, my wife, Suzerain, recently gave birth to our son, sir, and now my daughter is starting at a very good high school in Hoson. That's great news. I'm happy for you. I appreciate it, sir, truly. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to afford a good private school if she scored less in the entrance exam. But I shouldn't have made my insecurity get to me. Erica outsmarts me all the time. I'm very proud to have a daughter like her. So that means she must have taken the smarts after her mother. He let out a laugh. She must have. My daughter looks up to the First Lady for inspiration. And it's not just my daughter, sir. She's an inspiration for almost all women in the country. But at the same time, it must be hard for the First Lady as well. All this attention, adjusting to the new high-profile life, and a husband that has great responsibility. You're right, it's hard for her. It must be, sir. We sometimes forget the important people in life between all the responsibility and rush. You know, those we care for. I agree. Sergei continued for a moment silent. Have I told you, sir? We named my son George. The doctor said he is very healthy, and thankfully, so is my wife. That's good. I hope the hospital had good service. Normally, we would have been treated in one of the suburban hospitals, but thanks to the special coverage of the presidential staff, we were transferred to Emerald State Hospital. We need to increase the quality of service for all. That sounds like a tough issue to solve, Sergei sighed. I already started thinking about their university education, especially Erica. I want to send her to a good private school, but with the current state of the economy, it's going to be hard for us. That seems out of bounds for us to do that. And 2 wealth, too. Oh, it would make him very loyal, for sure, but still. That's not the direction we're going. We'll fix the economy one way or the other. If anyone can, that's you, Mr. President. The car hit a major pothole and a bump which lifted up in our seat for a second. Are you fine? Yes, sir. I hope the car is fine too. The motorcade began approaching the hotel. Hotel West was supposedly the best hotel in Narbel. The large 25-story main building was undoubtedly one of the taller and more expansive buildings in the city. It towered over the nearby slums and had been a target for protests when it was first built. A crowd was gathered in front of the hotel, with the welcoming committee at its center. As we approached the red carpeted entrance, I could see the mayor of Narbel and his top aide. Sergei got out of the car, opened the door, he bowed his head respectfully and gestured toward the entrance. See you later, Sergei. Thank you, sir. Likewise. As soon as I left the vehicle, the fresh air of Narbel filled my lungs. Almost immediately, everyone present at the crowd flocked over to me with an excessive display of courtesy, smiles and handshake while I donned the mask of a politician. A mask that I was very used to. And I'm assuming there's not going to be any other updates, and we're just going to proceed with our... Oh, there is a slight update. Yellow Sword suspect of terror attack. 17 people killed. Yeah, when you're in a position like this, these things just become numbers. And you really need to... well, the railroad's progressing. We really need some plan to stop this. We have no intention of having his party stand behind us. Protests appear calmer. Oh, thank God. 9,800 arrests. Counter protests against the Women's March. They're looking to attack our former leader. Education privatization proven successful. Lesbia. The left-leaning Lesbia, or the democratic leaning, I guess. Arcade, I can't really say they're the left. Yeah. The thing is, inequality is also an issue. We'll see what we can do when that time comes. Our budget is really thin. I hope there's a way for us to expand our budget or to go negative. Both are options. Let's have our briefing. I arrived at the meeting room for my talk with Sierra and Pascal. Before beginning, I took a moment to appreciate the view from the balcony. The mountains of Narbel were completely covered with snow. While I was mesmerized by the scene, Pascal Benuor, our Minister of Health, walked up to me. Ironically, somewhat portly, having gained a few pounds since his breakthrough as a best-selling writer, but his authority on social affairs could not be questioned. Such a spectacular view. Sierra Walda, the Minister of Education, joined us on the balcony, dressed in a sky blue pantsuit. Her preference for trousers over dresses had made her the subject of much palace gossip, but it didn't seem to bother her in the slightest. Spectacular indeed, but if you look at the opposite direction, you will see what Seoul's decade of neglect did to the city. Most of the people who live in Arbel are workers, farmers, and their wives and children. They're breaking their back for close to no pay, all thanks to greedy corporations. My intention is to help the working class. I'm glad we see eye to eye on the issue. If you look past the views, you can see the real problems like poverty. Pascal nodded gravely. This was a subject he knew quite a bit about himself. His best-known books were about the plight of the Sordland's less fortunate, drawing from his own past growing up in the squalors. Well put, Miss Walda. I don't need to tell you about my own experience with poverty. I'm sure you have similar stories. Am I right, Mr. President? Thankfully, we never had any problem with money. You know the saying, you don't know what you have until it is taken from you. You don't have to have been born poor to sympathize with the plight of the impoverished, much as you don't have to be born a woman to recognize Sordland's need for parity among the sexes. Ah, strong woman here. Parity among the sexes shouldn't be our first priority. Look at how many high-ranking female politicians our country have. Appearances can be deceiving, Pascal. Her voice sounded bitter. Think about how Lilia's Graf got to her current positions. I don't necessarily believe the rumor about her in Seoul, but she never could have risen so high if she didn't parrot his cause, right? I mean, she's a defender of Soulism for sure. Gloria Tori, is it an accident that the first female assembly speaker is such a staunch conservative? And then there was Alfonso's habit of promoting women to prominent position to give Sordland a progressive sheen, while accomplishing nothing in reality. When women in places like Narbel are denied any opportunity to advance, the government can use a handful of women politicians from the wealthy families, myself included, to pretend their only obstacle to succeed is their own lack of initiative. Meanwhile, those of us who don't use our clout to help powerful men stay in power are degenerated as angry spinsters. I ask you, Mr. President, does anyone care that your strategist, Mr. Galladay, doesn't have a wife? Huh. Leave Lucian out of this. Alright, Sierra, you made your point. As I was saying, isn't it about time Halsad addressed this country's real issue? I think she's only making this point because she doesn't have a husband, right? She's a miss. So people are making that a point against her, but no one makes it against Lucian, for example. Isn't this about time Halsad addressed this country's real issue rather than bowing to the wishes of the hawks and the fearmongers in the establishment, diverting yet more resources to military and law enforcement? Oh, oof. Our welfare, healthcare, and education system have been decaying since the recession. Sordland's poor communities are losing hope. Hopelessness and a lack of opportunity can drive people to extreme solutions. We are seeing increased crime, domestic violence, and yes, rising inequality between men and women. If we can stop the recession, create jobs and growth, the economic situation does play a huge role in living standards. Our urban and rural disparity are stark, and the recession hit the weakest harder. We can't fix the economy by ourselves. We have to educate the people and let them create new opportunities too. There's another subject I want to mention. I have been working on improving the rights of workers in our country, and have proposed a draft bill that is currently being reviewed by our party. Mr. Calvin have backed me and given his support, Sordland have fallen behind most countries on the subject, and it's my responsibility to ensure that this is not the case. Worker standard, huh? There's always room for improvement. It's good to hear that you're pushing for it. Appreciate the kind words. There's a problem here. We need business support, of course. We're not on the business goods side, so I guess I don't really care too much about it. But we need Mr. Calvin and his reformist faction within our party's support. It's also a matter of life and death. Every decade we hear some horrific accident due to the employer's disregard for their workers' safety. So would you back the bill when it arrives on your desk, Mr. President? I would need to see the content. Understandable. You'll receive all the sections in an outline. It's getting a little cold out there. I'll hear. Let's head inside and continue our discussion. The meeting room was already prepared for state business. Small gifts for each of us had been placed on the table by the municipality. We took our seats. let's start with the health overview. As you wish. Sordland has a free healthcare system except for a few private hospitals operating under it, so it's a state-owned healthcare system. Most of the populace receive adequate treatment. Health issues primarily appear in rural areas due to lack of quality service. I'm doing my best to ensure the citizens of all age receive the best healthcare they can. I also personally want to solve the high infant and maternity mortality problem. How many doctors and nurses? We have 31,000. Okay, they're using the period style rather than the comma style. 594 doctors and 73,680 nurses working for the Ministry of Health. This is a high number. What I think is, I don't want to be rude out there, but number how many are in rural area? Good point. The data shows per 10,000 people in urban area, there's about 11 doctors. In rural area, there's only about 3. Okay, so we're talking about 3/10 split, 31, 20-something% to 70-something%. Treatment time is still too high due to the low number of doctors in rural area, which barely gets any proper coverage. How many hospital beds are there per 10,000? There are 10 beds per 10,000 citizens, which is a very good number according to our comparisons with our other neighbors. We see a lower number in countries like Anglia and Wayland, but obviously can't match Lesbia or Vauxland. Anolia and Wayland are hardly countries to take as a standard, but it's good to know we aren't in a huge health crisis yet. What's life expectancy and mortality rate? 65 years old, and infant mortality rate worrying 85 per 1,000 birth. That is actually quite alarming. And 90 per 1,000 for maternal mortality? But assure that we're doing everything we can to save mothers and their newborns. Those numbers are saddening indeed. We must do everything we can. We're working on very hard on improving quality of service. Thank you. Let's look at education. Sordland's education is free, but we have a very outdated system that I want to reform. The other important issue is the lack of access to education in rural area, especially for young girls. We have the power to solve both. My highest priority is to get enough funding to be able to build schools in rural areas where I cleanse our education system of nationalistic indoctrination and sexist teachings. How many students and teachers do we have? 5 million students, 3 million in primary, 1 million in secondary, 1 million in tertiary. There are 155,000 and change teachers. Okay. It is full of potential indeed. Literacy rate, 80%. That is very good. That's much better than I thought. Bergia, England, okay. So Nargis is also bad, but Lockhaven has a high amount. The difference, 3 times number of school per 10,000 compared to Aurora. Lack of teachers. Is it because teachers don't want to work? Salaries are very low. Okay. And everything is state run, so everything's going to have to come out of that budget. What is it, Sarah? Looking at this impoverished city, the street full of potholes, this hospital barely functioning, the school half open. This is not just about Seoul, even Alfonso's failing. This decay in Sordland's forgotten region has been going on for many decades due to structural corruption, which is fueled by capitalism. We're here to change that. That remains to be seen. I'm working on a new education system, and your support will be welcomed. One way or another, we need to transform. Greed and unchecked capitalism will not magically provide for the people. Provide for some people, just not all people. So what is your plan? Increasing government budget. Allocated money. Build schools in these less fortunate rural areas through fundamental change to the education system. Unlock the potential of our children, boys and girls alike. It's a good idea. Pascal is promoting private education to help create additional funds. Yes, but at what cost? I'm not a supporter of the private sector in education because at the end of the day, they're focused on profit first. What are you working on? Low quality of healthcare. Great draft plan, increase salaries of doctors, upgrading equipment of hospitals. I can do more with increased budget. Additionally, a privatization plan to promote private investment in the healthcare system could allocate more funds. Access is the issue, but not as critical as the quality. Increase the price. Right, state run versus privatization. Yes, we will have to reconvene at the budget meeting. It's a group of supporters. Wearing clothes a few sizes too large. Some kids didn't even have shoes, yet there was hope in their eyes. They were excited to see the president in their city. That's why we showed up. To say you guys are not forgotten. Oh dear. I thought things are dying down. Young swords decapitated. Tortured with hot iron rods before his tongue was cut off. Red youth. Alright, no news, but some few reports here. Mining disaster. 82 death toll. NFP is currently against any threshold reforms. Yes, they want the 10%. They have only 11% of support, by the way. The Workers' Right Act of 1954, proposed by Albin Calvin. And supported by the Minister of Health. Labor Union also supported. Workers' rights. And we are here for banning youth organizations. Ooh. Both organizations haven't officially organized or called for illegal actions, but several low to mid-level leaders from both are linked to insightful actions that led to death, injuries, and instability. This allowed us to ban the organizations. Is this really a solution? I don't think we need this. They can do as they please. Don't ban. Could lead to instability down the line, but we'll deal with that when that time comes. Ooh, the final draft of our constitutional plan. This is going to be rough for us to find support for this. I was walking to my office and today was the day to edit and make the final changes to the proposal to change the constitution of Sordland. The reform committee finally bore tangible results and the draft of the change were about to be presented. I walked into the marble corridors of the palace thinking about the massive steps we are about to take. My secretary Livia greeted me at the entrance to my office. Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, Livia. How are you today, sir? Perfectly fine. Good to hear. She paused before taking my coat. It looked like she had something on her mind. Mr. Rayne, can you give me a hint about your reform plans? If you ask me, taking away the judge's immunity is long overdue, but it might anger a lot of people in these halls. Nothing's been decided yet. I hope you keep me informed. I'll take your coat now. Livia left to hang up my coat. I entered my office and sat down. Not long after, Peter and Lucian arrived. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Time to finally get this proposal going. Peter placed the draft in front of me. After your modifications, we'll start the process, sir. Let's go over each point. Well, apart from the first two sections of decreasing the Supreme Court's authority and limiting the presidential veto, other sections are up for debate. We can start talking about Section 3. This is about impeachment process of the president. Currently, in the case of high treason and breaking the Constitution, the Supreme Court may impeach and try the president. We should try to make the impeachment process more difficult or entirely get rid of it. A change like this would give you free reign. However, this might be going a little too far. This law is particularly dangerous for you in this case. We will be going against the old guard, and if we prove to be successful in the assembly, they will be looking for anything they can declare unconstitutional and tackle you. All they need is the Supreme Court to impeach you. Right. I'm slightly in favor of adding the assembly on this. Making the process involve both of the other branches. Move on to section 4. This is regarding the appointment of ministers. Currently, the president is free to appoint anyone from the members of the assembly. Nobody else is involved in the process, so there's no reason to change this unless you want to sell this to the opposition parties. Sharing the power with the assembly may make them sympathetic to you. This might be important for the NFPs as well. I don't mind sharing this actually, but the confidence vote here, it's interesting. Basically, I pick, they approve, right? Which is what I assume. This probably means the assembly pick for me. Let's do this. That's not a bad idea. As long as we're in the majority in the assembly, that does not change too much. I'm sure some of the reformists will support that. The 5th section is about our infamous electoral threshold. Most reformists want to lower the threshold as much as possible. We could try working with them, but it's simpler to keep the law. Yes, but this is a delicate matter. The party, and I mean not even Albin, wants to change the threshold. They think that this would destroy our party in the long term. Not wrong. 10% threshold is what allowed us to control half the assembly, with only a 30% majority in the election. A decrease is out of the question. The court would also not agree with a decrease. Increasing it might be out of the question too. On one hand, you might think the court might love us because we are going to have a higher threshold for blocking out the Buddhist and the communists, but the problem becomes that the National Frontier Party only has 11% if I remember correctly. So increasing it might kick them out of government entirely. And then based on the remaining percentages, we're actually going to lose vote compared to the People's Freedom and Justice Party. So I don't think we want that. I think just keeping it as is probably what we want. Yeah, it should be. 2 major left parties, the Communist Party and the Workers' Party of Buddha, both had close to 10% vote in the last election. Decreasing the threshold might mean opening their way into the assembly. An increase on their hand is more complex. The NFPs could be out of the assembly, but that would mean the PFJP seat would get higher too if they left with only 2 parties in the assembly. Exactly my point. We should keep using the threshold to our advantage. I agree, sir. You've got some time to think about your decision, sir. We are at the 6th. This is about the presidential decree. You already know that the reformers want them to be removed or limited, but I'm guessing you don't want any changes to already powerful decrees, sir. We could try to balance it with the reformers and make it dependent on enabling act from the assembly. Sure, it would make the whole process longer, but as long as we have majority, nothing really changes. I don't think it needs any change. Me neither. I think it's important that the president can act quickly on a matter of national importance. For now, I move on to the next one, term limit. Term limits. Yes, Tarquin governed for 20 years. It seems his magic is slowly vanishing from the minds of the people, for they believe term limits are necessary. But of course I don't. Hey, if people keep electing one person, that means they really are content. The masses are scared of change. We'll leave it to the president to decide. Now, moving into the 8th section, we are reaching the end. It's the question about the immunity of the judges. While anti-old guard sentiments increasing, there are talks about taking away their immunity will give us authority over judiciaries. If we can remove their immunity or defy an impeachment clause, we could clean the court from Orso and his gang. They're not our friend. I don't really want to give them their immunity. This is a delicate balance. How do we sell the judges on the proposal that is going to get rid of their immunity that requires half of them to agree to us? Crushing the old guards is hard. But I think this is the move we should try to make now. They're not going to be our friend. No need to be shy about this. We need to find other ways to clear this. But it would be tough to persuade the judges with this. Mrs. Edmund and Mr. Garisi may not want to cooperate with you if they believe you're going to get rid of them afterwards. And the last one is the question about Sol's legacy. Basically, his member of honor law. Give him absolute immunity even when he's retired. He's a permanent member of the assembly as well, but luckily he doesn't really attend anymore. According to the Constitution, member of honor not only has legal immunity, but the state also covers most of the expenses while providing security at all time. It can only be given to someone by an absolute majority vote in the assembly and the approval of the president. That's why only Tarkin Sol has it. He gave it to himself right after his military coup. This law is basically made to save the colonel. I think some of the reformers really want to try him for his crimes during his term, especially against the British. This law really has symbolic importance both for them and the soulless. Let's respect this law. This is a line I don't think we can cross. I agree, this really had no importance for the new constitution, also So is a hero for many swords, whether we like it or not. Sure, you're right. Well, regardless of what you decide, we will need to work together to push this agenda. Alright, let's work on the draft. Alright, we're finally making some real changes. Presidential vetoes. According to Article 7782, the President may veto a bill by returning it to the Assembly with a written statement. The article does not contain any information on how to override a veto. As a consequence, the President has absolute veto power that cannot be overridden by the Assembly, Grand National Assembly under any circumstance. We'll give them a 2/3 veto majority. If we are a president and we don't even have more than 1/3 support from our National Assembly, that is a very bad presidency. Let's just say that. That is silly. So basically they can override with a supermajority, which is 2/3. However, it will not contain any time limit for a president to act on a bill, giving them power to ignore the bill indefinitely. So basically we don't have to say yes to their veto for... No. They can beat us with a supermajority. I'm okay with that. Constitutional amendment process. According to Article 5 of the Constitution, amendment may be proposed by a member of the Assembly with at least 150 signatures, 2/3 majority vote, and a simple majority vote in the Supreme Court is required for the amendment. As a consequence, the Supreme Court, which is not part of the elected legislative branch, has enormous power in the amendment process. Do we want to remove their vote? This seems to be, something that we have to do, because this is something that the reformists inside the Assembly all want. And we don't have a choice here. The impeachment. They can work together on the impeachment. Right now, the judges have the sole power of impeaching us. We need to weaken them. It's okay. We can be impeached. It's our job to try to prevent that situation. The minister vote. I nominate, they vote. Do not change the threshold. Our decrees. Present decree have priority over statutory law, not subject to judicial reviews. That is quite strong. Currently, we can do decrees that will carry the force of law. Granted, they don't contradict the Constitution as subject to judicial review. Therefore, the President may issue decrees on many subjects without going through the Grand National Assembly. However, the Assembly may pass legislation on the same subject to override the decrees, which we can veto. Decrees requires enabling act. No, we don't need to be enabled by our Assembly. I don't need to make it stronger. We keep it as is. It's pretty strong. Term limits. You know, we can always change this. Once we remove the judges from the Constitution decision making, we can always go back on this. We will look bad, of course, but we need to get this passed. The reformists will love us. Let's do 2 for now. To be honest, unless our life is in danger after we quit, I don't know if anyone really enjoys being president deep down inside. It's just a lot of power, a lot of responsibility, and also a lot of stress. The Constitution gives the justice of the Supreme Court total immunity. Right, we want to get rid of this. That would be lovely, but I don't see how we can get that passed. We need to make this about the Assembly versus the judges, or at least that's how I see it. Let the people's representative decide whether the judges should be removed. Do not change. Wow, this is our big moment. After the final changes to the proposal were made, I showed it to the team. After looking at the changes, the team began discussing it among themselves. Lucian spoke afterward. Looks like the amendments are ready to be proposed. I'm good. Let's proceed. Lucian looked at me. We'll be working on the wording of the proposal with our legal expert before we propose it. In the meantime, you must introduce this proposal to our party, sir. You'll need a strong speech to get them behind you, but I advise you to first talk to the leader of both conservative and reformist wings of the party. As far as I'm aware, Mr. Calvin will be our biggest problem. He may try to paint you as a dictator. Mrs. Tory will also be tough, but we'll need to get her first. Any advice in dealing with them? As Mr. Richter said, Mrs. Tory will probably be easier to persuade. We need to unite the party under these changes, so her support is vital. Mr. Calvin would be tougher to break. The problem is he can also influence the moderates against this. As much as I don't want to say this, if they make any demands to change the proposals, you may need to give in. Thanks for the advice. Wish you good luck with the party, sir. I think we can end the meeting here. That was our big moment, I think. Our big constitutional change. Mysterious and dangerous reforms from what? Sordland today. Different than initially outlined. Instead of balancing the power structure, President Rayne might intend to do the opposite and tilt the imbalance farther in favor of the ready powerful office of the president, which is occupied by himself. We realize that this significant incident is indeed real as soon as we also learned that his cabinet reached out to the far-right leading NFP led by Kibner. Preparation underway for the annual Binfi, right here. Festival. High Arts, 8,000 people. Might need some security protection there. But anyways, we got a report. Reform Committee. Alright, we need to gather support from our party. That seems to be... oh no, back to the Business Council. So I think we'll end our episode here as we have rounded out, well, started turn 3 with our decision on the reforms of the Constitution, and we'll move on to that as we proceed forward. So until next time, bye!